Welcome to Halachot Purim. We are working in the sefer called Chazon Ovadia by Chacham Ovadia. In today's class, we're going to discuss the topic on Mishloach Manot, sending to one person on Purim 2 Manot of food. Manot literally means portions. Now, as we're going to see in Megillat Esther, it's going to state that we have an obligation to send the Mishloach Manot. It's very important to note that the word manot plays a very big role in understanding why we are sending two types of foods, as we're going to see. Because the word manot in plural is portions, meaning to tell you two. Had it stated mishloach mana, which would have been singular, we would have understood from that language that you only need to send one type of food. The fact that it states manot, which is plural for two, so therefore we're going to tell you that whenever we're dealing with sending the mishloach manot, since the minimum of plural is two, the minimum you can send on Purim the mishloach manot has to be two types of food. Halacha Aleph. Chayav Adam l'shloch lechaver b'yom Purim. A person is obligated to send to his friend on the day of Purim shtei manot, two portions, shel shnei minei ochlim, of two types of food, or shnei minei tavshil, or two types of cooked dishes, or shtei manot basar, or two portions of meat. Begins Chacham Ovadia and he says that every single Jew has an obligation, as we're going to see, a person who's a gadol, who's over 13, and a woman who's over 12, every single Jew has an obligation to send to his friend on the day of Purim itself two kinds of food. It could be cooked dishes, it could be two portions of meat. We'll see, it could even be raw meat. As we're going to go along, we're going to see all of these halachot. Ukemoshe nemar, like it is stated in Megillat Esther, lasot otam, to make them, yimei mishta v'simcha, to make them days of feast and joy. Umishloach manot, here we go, Rabotai. It says in Megillat Esther, umishloach manot, and sending manot, again, like we said earlier, meaning portions, and minimum for portions is two. Ish lere'ehu. We're going to learn out from the word also ish lere'ehu, the fact that it says a fellow man to his friend. We're going to see that the obligation to sending the mishloach manot is one Jew to another Jew. You're not obligated to give more than one person, because the pasuk says in Megillat Esther, u'mishloach manot ish lere'ehu. You need to send portions, minimum is two, a fellow man to his friend. That is the basic halacha. Then it says, umatanot le'evyonim, bezrat Hashem b'li neder. In the following class, we're going to see the laws of giving presents to the poor. Over there it says le'evyonim. Also, Rabotai plays a very big role in understanding why it states evyonim. The fact that it says evyonim, the fact that it says poor people, in plural, same thing, Rabotai. The minimum of poor people in plural has to be two. So that's what we're going to tell you, that the present that you have to give to the poor, minimum has to be two people. If it would have stated umatanot le'evyon, and the present to the poor, meaning to one per person, okay, the obligation would have been to one person. But the fact that it states umatanot le'evyonim, the fact that it says that you have to give the present to poor people in plural, so we have to understand that the minimum is two. So that's what, if you pay close attention, over here it says ish lere'ehu. A fellow man to his friend. The obligation when it comes to mishloach manot is to one person. But when it comes to matanot le'evyonim, since it says evyonim plural for two poor people, so the obligation is going to be to two people. Continues Rav Chaim Igal and he says, Ve'atam lekach, and the reason for this, and the reason for sending Mishloach Manot, what is the whole purpose by sending Mishloach Manot? So explains Rav Chaim Igal and he says, Ki al yidei she'adam sholech lechaver tushra u'mincha, through the fact that a person sends to his friend a present, he expresses to him with this feelings of love and dearness towards the recipient. And through this, through the fact that the sender is sending the recipient the Mishloach Manot, through this, it is planted also in the heart of the recipient ahava, love, ve'achva, dearness, shalom, peace, ve'reut, and friendship. So we see over here, Rabotai, that the whole point of the Mishloach Manot is to build that relationship of love, dearness, peace, and friendship. Ki kamayim apanim lepanim kim lev adam le'adam. Because we know, Rabotai, what the verse states. Just like when it comes to water, if you put your face to the water, you're going to see your face. So too is the heart of a person to a person. Whatever you feel inside, the other person is also going to feel inside. So that's why it's very important to go ahead and send the Mishloach Manot on the day of Purim itself, to be able to increase that love and that brotherhood amongst one Jew and the other. Shikol mishpatei Torotena kedosha, because all the laws of our holy Torah are there for what? Laharbot shalom, to increase peace. Bein adam lechavero, between a fellow man and his friend. Kimo shenemar, like it states, darachecha darchei noam, the ways of the Torah are ways of pleasantness. Vechol nitivotecha shalom, and all its paths are peaceful. Ve'od, and furthermore, ki yeshnam anshem mechoseri kol, Rabotai, some people, they lack everything. You have to remember, Rabotai, not every single person has the ability to be able to have a good Su'udat Purim. So therefore comes Rav Chaim Igal and he gives us another reason right now why it's important to say Mishloach Manot. Besides the fact that you have to go out and you have to increase friendship and peace and love. But he says there's another reason. Ki yeshnam anashim mechoseri kol, you have people that they are lacking. Tzni'im bihilchotechem, they're very modest in their ways. Asher yivoshu lifshod yadam lekabel tzedakah, that they're embarrassed to stretch out their hand to accept charity. Kidei lekayem mitzvah sudat purim b'machal ubishte kedat, in order to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of the sudat purim with food and feast, like the halacha requires. Masha'enkin, but which wouldn't be the case, kishisholech lahem derech kavod. But if you're going to send to them in an honorable way, mishloach manot isha l're'ehu, if you're going to send to them portions of food, a fellow man to his friend, lo yivoshu v'lo yichlamu, they're not going to be embarrassed, they're not going to be ashamed. V'kacha anu mishtafim otam b'simchat Purim. This time we're going to be able to join them in the joy of Purim. So comes Rav Chaim Igal and he tells you two reasons why we need to send Mishloach Manot. Number one is to go ahead and build that love between one Jew and the other Jew. Number two, Rabotai, maybe there are people that are lacking the basic needs to be able to have a good Su'udat Purim. Comes Rav Chaim Igal and he says, but if you're going to give them Mishloach Manot, since they are afraid of asking and they are ashamed of asking, so now by you giving them the Mishloach Manot, you're making it easier for them. Now you're going to be able to join them into the Simcha of Purim, and they're going to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Sudat Purim like the halacha requires. Al derech sheneimar, in the manner that it is said, V'shalchu manot le'ein nachon lo, and you should send the portions to one who has nothing prepared. V'ikar mitzvah sheyushtei manot le'ish echad, and the main mitzvah is to be able to send two portions of food, two different types of foods, to one person. Halacha bet, yesh omrim shetzarich l'shloach hamanot כשהן מבושלות וראויות ומזומנות לאכילם. There are those rabbis that want to say that one needs to send the Mishloach Manot when they are cooked, when they are proper, when they are ready for consumption. ויש חולקים, and there are those that disagree, ואומרים, and they say, שיוצאים ידי חובה גם במנות בשר חי, you are able to fulfill your obligation even with raw meat, ורק אם שולח עוף חי שלא נשחט עדיין וכיוצא בזה, only if you would have sent a chicken which is still not slaughtered and anything similar to that, meaning if you're sending live poultry, over there you do not fulfill your obligation. וכן עיקר, and the halach is like this later opinion, that one is allowed to send raw food to another person as his Mishloach Manot. Nevertheless, it has to be slaughtered. If it is not slaughtered, you did not fulfill the obligation of Mishloach Manot. ויוצאים ידי חובת משלוח מנות גם בבשר שימורים שבקופסאות. You are also able to fulfill your obligation by sending Mishloach Manot, also with meat which is preserved in jars or boxes, or בסרדנים, or with sardine fish, וכיוצא בזה, and similar things to that. All Hamavad is telling us over here in Halacha Bet that a person can't send raw food as a Mishloach Manot, and you could also send preserved meat or preserved fish in the jar or can, etc. Halacha Gimel, Hasholech lechaver doron shel begadim. What happens if a person sends to his friend a present of clothing? Your Mishloach Manot is not going to be food, it's going to be clothing. V'sadanim, or sheets, v'kiyotze bazen, and anything similar to that. Eino yotze b'zeh yedei chovat Mishloach Manot. You do not fulfill with this your obligation when it comes to Mishloach Manot. V'afilo hasholech ma'od lechavero be'ofen sheyuchal liknot behem manot machal. And even if you're going to send money to your friend in a way where he's going to be able to go ahead and buy portions of food, Eino yotze yedei chova, you do not fulfill your obligation. Shetzarich l'shloach bedavka manot shel machal u'mishteh. You need to send specifically portions of food and feast. V'chen, and so too, hasholech lechaver kufsuot sigriot. If a person sends to his friend a box of cigarettes, or tabak arecha, or if he sends to his friend the smelling tobacco, lo nechshav lemana, it's not considered to be a portion of food. Letzet bazeh yedei mishloach manot, to fulfill your obligation with this, the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Afil k'sheyodei mikabel ma'ashen u'marich tabak. Even if you know the recipient, the one that's receiving the cigarette or the tobacco, is a person who smokes and he does smoking through the nose. V'chen, and so too Talmid Chacham, and so too if you have a Talmid Chacham. Hasholech lechaver chidushay Torah uparparot lechachma. If you have a Talmid Chacham that he sends to his friend chidushay Torah, novelties of Torah, uparparot lechachma, an appetizer for wisdom, he sends him, let's say, things to learn on Purim day, something beautiful, or Sifrei Kodesh, or holy books, beyond Purim, on the day of Purim. Eino yotze bazeh yedei chovat Mishloach Manot. You do not fulfill with this your obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Halacha Daled. Hasholech lechaveru basar ubakbuk yain, v'kiyotze bazeh yotze bazeh yedei chovat Mishloach Manot. If a person sends as his Mishloach Manot to his friend meat and a bottle of wine and anything similar to this, he fulfills his obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Shigam hamashke nechshav lemana achat, because also the liquid is considered to be one portion of food. Va'afilu shalach shnei minei mashkim bilvad, even if you had sent two kinds of drinks alone, yotze yedei chovat Mishloach Manot, you fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Nevertheless, says Chacham Ovadia, v'tov, and it's good, lehader v'lishloch shnei minei ocholim. it is good to go after and send as your Mishloach Manot 2 kinds of food. Halacha hey, yesh l'shloach hamanot shel ochelim shnei minim shonim. When it comes to the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, you want to be able to send the Mishloach Manot of 2 different kinds of food. They are not allowed to be the one and the same food. Aval, however, bimin ma'achal echad. What happens if you made one food? Afilu chilko b'shtei tzalachot o karot. Even if you went and you divided this one food into 2 different plates or into 2 different bowls, eino yotze b'zeh yedei chovat mishloach manot. You do not fulfill with this your obligation for the mitzvah of mishloach manot. Aval, however, he says, hasholech hatichot basar me'evarim shonim afilu mebehem achat. But if you're sending as your mishloach manot pieces of meat from limbs of the animal, but they're different types of limbs, yotze bahem yidei mishloach manot, you are able to fulfill with them the mitzvah of mishloach manot. Why? Ho'il vehem chalukim betamam v'tiv'am, since they are different in their taste and in their nature. So comes the Chacham and he says that if you're going to send one type of food, even if it's in different types of plates or bowls, doesn't help you to fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. We need you to go ahead and send 2 different types of food. However, Chacham says, say you take a chicken and you're going to send the breast of the chicken or the leg of the chicken or the thigh of the chicken, right? All these things, Rabota, even though it comes from one animal, we're going to tell you that is not a problem because each one has a different taste and different nature. Continues Chacham and he says, and for sure, Im hayu chaticho shel basar chai, if these pieces were raw meat, she'efshar la'asot memenu, that is possible to do from it, kama minei tavshelin, many kinds of cooked dishes, otzli u'mevashal. They can either roast this meat since it's raw, or they can go ahead and they cook this meat. So there's many things you can go ahead and you can do with the raw pieces of meat. So comes Chacham and he says that when it comes to the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, giving one food of the same kind, even in different plates or bowls, that's not going to help you to fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Nevertheless, when it comes to using one animal and using different limbs of that animal and different parts, and especially if it's raw, you're going to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Halacha vav, hasholech lechaveru dag mitugan ima beitza she'alav. If a person is going to send as this Mishloach Manot to his friend fish which is fried in oil with egg that is on top of the fish, are we going to look at that fish which is basically dipped in the egg and then fried in the oil? Are we going to look at it as 2 kinds of food because you have an egg over there and you have the fish? Or are we going to say that it's really one dish since they are together? Now, Rabotai, you have to remember, if I would have sent him the fish by itself and the egg by itself, I would have fulfilled my obligation for Mishloach Manot. But over here, Rabotai, what am I doing? I'm combining the fish with the egg, and then I'm frying it in oil. Is that, Rabotai, good enough to fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot? So comes the Chacham in Halacha Vav and he says, Hasholech lechaveru dag mitugan ima beitza shelav. If a person is going to send to his friend fish which is fried in oil with the egg on it, yosif imo mana acheret. Add with it another portion of food, because we're not going to look at that as it's 2 kinds of food. Why? Sheledat kama achronim, because according to some later generation rabbis, hadag ubeitza shelav, the fish and the egg that is on top of the fish, nechshavim kimana achat le'inyan zeh. They're considered to be one portion in regards to this. So therefore, Rabotai, if you're sending fried fish, which was dipped in an egg, to your friend as your Mishloach Manot, it does not count as 2 portions, rather counts as 1 portion. So therefore, Rabotai, you have an obligation to send another portion with this fried fish. Ve'u adin, the same halach is going to apply. Lemi shesholech lechaver mulyatam. The same halakha is going to apply, Rabotai, if a person is going to go ahead and he's going to send to his friend mulyata, which is called pastil. What is a pastil, Rabotai? It's a type of pastry or dough where you fill it in. For example, samsa or goshgeje, hamemole basar, which is filled with meat. Same halakha is going to apply, Rabotai. You cannot fulfill your obligation with the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot by sending goshgeje or anything like that, or pastry, with filled with something. That's not going to help you. Even though, Rabotai, again, even though had I sent the meat separately and the dough separately, that would have helped. It would have been fine. But since I'm combining them, it's really one. So therefore he tells you, the same halakha is going to apply. If somebody's going to send to his friend as his Mishloach Manot, mulyata, which is a pastry type of pocket where you're going to go ahead and you're going to fill it up with meat, or isam mitugenet shemamoled betocha bizrunim v'ketiyot samuvasach, or you're going to go ahead and you're going to take a dough which is fried in oil where you filled it in with seeds and legumes. Same halakha, Rabotai. Sheyesh lohosiv im hamana hazot. You want to go ahead and you want to add to this portion mana nosevet memin acher. You want to go ahead and you want to add to this portion another portion from a different kind. Why? Kedei shiyu shtei manot. In order for you to have two portions. V'asholech pat v'tav. So if somebody's going to send to his friend as his Mishloach Manot bread and a cooked dish, chashuv kishtei manot. They're considered to be like two portions, and you fulfill your obligation with this in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Halacha zayin. Ra'ui lizaher b'mitzvah Mishloach Manot. It is proper for one to be careful in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Shehiyu shtei hamanot yikarot v'chashuvot. That the two portions of food that you're going to be sending to your friend, that they should be expensive and important. Lifi erech hanoten, according to the one that's giving it. Why? Kedei laha'arod chiba v'reut lemikabel, in order to show dearness and friendship to the one that is receiving it. V'ima mikabel ashir biyoter. What happens if the one that you're sending it to, the recipient himself, is very wealthy? Tov sheyugam lifi erech mikabel. It's also good if you could send your Mishloach Manot according to the value of the recipient. And it's also good that you should have in the Mishloach Manot the amount that you need to go ahead and make the meal. Halakha chet. Lechatchila, initially or ideally, tov l'shloch es shtei hamanot bebat achat. It is good to send the two portions of food as your Mishloach Manot at one time. And not one after the other. Because when you're sending it together, its importance is much more recognizable. And there's someone that wants to say, you should go ahead and you should divide the portions, and to go ahead and you should place each portion in a utensil. Now, Rabotai, this is very important. A lot of times when a person gives the food, you give everything in one bag, or in one plate, or in one basket. That, Rabotai, according to this opinion, he says, again, not that it's bad, it's just there's an opinion that says you should go and you should divide it, and you should put it into two different utensils. So when they give these baskets, that is all beautiful and nice. Maybe with that basket, you want to give maybe a bottle of wine, or maybe bread, or something outside, in a different utensil, so you're able to fulfill this opinion. Halakha tet. Kol amarbe l'shloch manot l'ri'im harei ze mishubach. Anyone who increases in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot to send it to his friends, this is very praiseworthy. She'al yidei ze marbim chiba v're'ut ben adam l'chveru. Because through this you're going to increase the dearness and friendship between a fellow man and his friend. Umikol makom, and nevertheless, kol sheshalach manot kihalacha le'adam echad mechaveru. If someone went ahead and he sent the Mishloach Manot like the halacha requires him to do so from one person to his friend, you don't have to be careful with all the details that we spoke about above when you're going to send to the other friends. Because all this is only to beautify the mitzvah. So therefore, Chacham Ovadia says, once you sent out one Mishloach Manot according to the letter of the law, the others, if you want to go ahead now and send it out in order to increase the love and the dearness and the friendship between you guys, you don't have to be particular with all the halachot. So you can send out one Mishloach Manot like the halacha requires, and the rest you can do whichever way you like. Halacha Yud. Tov shelo lasot sudat Purim ad la'achar shikayem mitzvat Mishloach Manot u'matanot le'evinim. Aval, however, letom me'at, however, to go ahead and taste a little bit, lefneken, before you did the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot and matanot le'evinim, mutar, it is permissible. Ve'en bekach klum, it's nothing wrong with it. Ve'aminag kayom, and the minhag today, l'shloach menei mitika le'mishloach manot. One is allowed to go ahead and send different types of sweets as his Mishloach Manot. Chacham Ovadia writes that is the custom. Halacha Yud Aleph. Yotzei Adam Yidei Chovat Mishloach Manot Kishesholech Lerabo. A person is able to fulfill his obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot when he sends it to his rabbi. Shugam ken bechlal u'Mishloach Manot ish l're'ehu, because he's also included in the rule of where it says you have to send a Mishloach Manot, a fellow man, to his friend. V'gam yesh b'zeh mitzvat aseh dikevod Torah l'shloch l'rabo kifi kevodo, because you also have over here a positive commandment, which is the honor of the Torah by sending to your rabbi according to his honor. V'chen harav sheshalach letalmido yatza, and so too, if the rabbi sent his Mishloach Manot to his student, he also fulfilled his obligation. Ve'aben shesholech la'aviv Mishloach Manot, if you have a son that he sent his Mishloach Manot to his father, ve'chen ha'av shesholech lebanav, and you have a father that went ahead and he sent the Mishloach Manot to his son, yotzeim bazeh yedei chovat Mishloach Manot. They fulfill with this the obligation in Mishloach Manot. So Rabotai, you see over here clearly how lenient Chacham Ovadia is. If a student sends to his rabbi, or a rabbi to his student, or the son to the father, or the father to the son, in all of these cases we're going to tell you, you have fulfilled your obligation in Mishloach Manot. Halacha Yut Bet. Kahal mikurei Torah, a congregation that honors Torah, asher na'atzu lev yachadav, where they went ahead and they took counsel together, v'nishtatefavu b'yachad, and they went ahead and they joined together, v'kanu b'sikum ha'ma'ot migdaniot u'minei ma'adanim. They went, Rabotai, with the sum of the money that they collected from the whole congregation, they went to buy delicacies and different types of fine foods, likayem mitzvat Mishloach Manot lerabam hadagul, to go ahead and to fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot to their important rabbi. Yotziim bazeh yedei chovat Mishloach Manot. They are able to fulfill with this their obligation in the Mishloach Manot. Even these people that they gave as the sum of the money, not a lot, which is less than the measurement of 2 meals, since they joined their friend in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, which was accepted with proper honor and great joy by the rabbi, they fulfilled with this the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. So comes Chacham Ovadia and he says, if you have a congregation that they go ahead and they collect money from everyone to go ahead and do the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, to go ahead and honor their distinguished rabbi, they fulfilled the obligation of Mishloach Manot. Everybody that gave money, they fulfilled the obligation of Mishloach Manot. Even the ones that gave a sum of less than 2 meals, still, they're going to be able to fulfill their mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Why? Because Rabotai, they're joining as one. Halacha Yud Gimel. Mitzvah Mishloach Manot biyom velo balayla. The mitzvah of Mishloach Manot is during the day and not during the night. Halacha Yud Daled. Isha chayevet b'mishloach manot. A woman is obligated in sending the Mishloach Manot. V'tishlach le'reuta. Very important halacha. She should send to another woman. Not a guy, Rabotai. She must send it to another woman. V'gam isha nisu'a eni yutza'ad b'mishloach manot shel ba'al bilvad. And so to a married woman, she does not fulfill her obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot through the husband alone. V'tov shelo yishluchu ish li'isha. And it's good that men should not send to women. V'isha li'ish. And women should not send to men. Why? Pen yavol l'disav kiddushin. Lest they're going to come to a doubtful kiddushin. Ela, rather, what should each one do? Yishluchu ish li'ish. V'isha li'isha. Everyone should go ahead and send to their own gender. Male to male, female to female. Now, Rabotai, Chacham Avadi says something very important. A woman that is married does not fulfill her obligation with her husband, which means to say she has to go ahead and give her own Mishloach Manot to her friend. V'abanim asumchim ala shulchan avihem. And children that depend on their father's table, meaning they're being supported by their father, miben yud gimel shanim umala, from 13 years and on, v'abanot, and the daughters migil yud bet shanim umala, from 12 years and on, chayavim b'mishloach manot lechavera. They are obligated in the Mishloach Manot to their friend. The boy is going to give it to his friend, the girl is going to give it to her friend. Va'afilu ketanim shegiu lechinuch tov lehancham lemitzvah zo. Even minors that they reached the age of education or training, it is good to go ahead and educate them in this mitzvah, also to give Mishloach Manot. Halacha tet vav. Oni hamitparnes min tzedakah gam ken chayav b'mishloach manot. If you have a poor person that gets sustained from charity, he is also obligated in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. V'im hu ani ve'en lo lesudat Purim ela manot elu. What happens if he's so poor that the only thing that he has for Sudat Purim is these two portions of food? Yachlifam im chaveru ha'ani. He should go to his poor friend and they should change their portions of food with one and the other. Shehu yishlach elav sudato. Let one poor person send his meal to the other poor person. V'chaveru yishlach elav ha'suda shelo. And let the other poor person send his su'udah to this poor person. Ubezeh, and with this, yikaimu u'mishloach manot ishel erehu. And with this, they will fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, a fellow man, to his friend. Aval, however, he says, Hasholech lechaveru manot. But if somebody sends to his friend portions of food, umatanei, and he makes a condition with him, shem matana al manat lahachzir, that there are a gift on condition to be returned, eina yotzeh bezeh yedei chavad mishloach manot. You do not fulfill with this the obligation of Mishloach Manot. Halacha tet zayin. Halokech manotav be'atzmo. If a person went ahead and he took his own portions of food by himself and he brought it to his friend, yotzei yedei chovat mishloach manot. He fulfills obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Ve'en tzorech l'shalcham al yidei shalich davka. There's no need to send them through a messenger specifically. You can go ahead and be your own messenger. Ve'chen, and so too. Hasholech manot al yidei katan shelo higi lemitzvot. And so too, if you went ahead and you sent the Mishloach Manot through a child, through a minor that did not reach the age of mitzvot, meaning he didn't reach 13, or she didn't reach the age of 12, or I feel like they go, even if you send it through a non-Jew, it doesn't help by them the law of making them a messenger. And even so, you fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. So therefore, if a person is going to go ahead and send his Mishloach Manot with a minor or a non-Jew, they fulfill the obligation of Mishloach Manot. V'asholech manot lekatan lo yatsa. If somebody sent his mishloach manot to a minor, you do not fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of mishloach manot. V'tzarich lachzor v'lishloach manot legadol. You need to go back and you need to resend the mishloach manot to an adult, someone who's over 13 years of age, but if it's a girl, over 12 years of age. Hasholech manot bepurim al yidei shaliach. If one sent the Mishloach Manot on Purim through a messenger, you do not need to go ahead and clarify if they reached the recipient, meaning to say, when one went ahead and he sent the Mishloach Manot through a messenger, do you have to find out the recipient if he received it on the day of Purim? Maybe he never got there. Comes Hakam then he says, if one sends the Mishloach Manot on Purim through a messenger, you do not need to clarify if the portions of food had reached to the one that it was sent to, meaning to the recipient. You do not need to find out. Why? Because the assumption is that the shaliach is going to go ahead and he's going to complete his sending. Meaning to say that when you're sending something with a messenger, you can be rest assured that he's going to get the job done. Aval, however, but if you sent the Mishloach Manot through a minor that did not reach the age of mitzvot, you need to go ahead and you need to find out, you need to clarify if the Mishloach Manot had reached its required destination, meaning did the recipient receive the Mishloach Manot? Halacha Yud Zayin. Hasholech Manot le'adam chashuv. If a person sent his Mishloach Manot to an important person, ein oto hamikabel yotzei yedei chavad Mishloach Manot b'kabalato. That recipient, who's a very important recipient, does not fulfill his obligation in Mishloach Manot by receiving it. Because of the enjoyment or because of the pleasure that the sender got by sending the portions to him. Because at the very least, all you have over here is pleasure. Without eating. Now, Rabotai, very important halakha. Comes Hakam and he says like this. Let's say you have Reuven and Shimon. Reuven is the sender. Shimon is the recipient. Let's say Shimon is a very important figure in the world. Now, listen to this very carefully. When Reuven sends the Mishloach Manot to Shimon, what happens, Rabotai? By Shimon receiving the Mishloach Manot, it gives pleasure back to Reuven. So maybe you're going to say, that Shimon also fulfilled his Mishloach Manot. Why? Because he gave him pleasure. He gave him benefit by accepting his Mishloach Manot. Comes Hakam and he says, no, that doesn't work like that. Because at the very least, what is the sender getting? He's only getting pleasure. But in the Mishloach Manot, it's not only feeling good, you also have over there eating. You have to be able to eat what you got. So by the recipient, who's a very important person, receiving the gift, even though he's giving this guy, the sender, Reuven, pleasure, doesn't mean anything about that because he's not going to be able to eat anything by giving him the Mishloach Manot. And that's what Chacham Avadi's son goes over here, Rabotai. A person who sent his Mishloach Manot to somebody very important, let the important person not think that he fulfills Mishloach Manot by giving the other guy, the sender, this good feeling that he's accepting it from him. It doesn't work because pleasure alone does not help. You have to also have over there eating. When it comes to Mishloach Manot, it has to be also eating included. Halakha Yud Chet. Hasholech Manot lere'ehu. If one sends his Mishloach Manot to his friend, v'serev hala'a lekablam, and the other guy, he refused to accept them. Say, I don't want your Mishloach Manot. Kigon, for example, shemachalu alahem. For example, I forgive you on them. I don't need it. Yachzor hasholech v'yikayem mitzvah Mishloach Manot la'adam acher. Let the sender go back and let him fulfill the obligation and the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot through somebody else. Rabotai, if the sender sent his Mishloach Manot to the recipient and the recipient did not accept it, don't think you fulfilled your obligation with the Mishloach Manot. In order to fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, you got to go back and send it to somebody else that's going to accept your Mishloach Manot. And that's what he's telling us here, Rabotai. Hasholech Manot l're'ehu v'sirev halal l'keblam. If one sent his Mishloach Manot to his friend and he refused from accepting them, Kigon, for example, shemachalo alhem, he forgave them on it. Yachzor hasholech, let the sholech go back, v'kayem mitzvah Mishloach Manot, and fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot la'adam acher, to another person. V'asholech Manot l'chaveru minei matika. If one went ahead and he sent as this Mishloach Manot to his friend different type of sweet things, even though the recipient, his friend, is not going to be able to eat it from reasons of health, for example, he has sugar problems. Even so, he fulfills his obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Why? Because at the very least, he cannot eat all the sweet delicacies, but his family members can go ahead and eat it. So therefore, if you went ahead and you sent, let's say you sent candy, chips, lollipop, all these different types of sweet things to a person who has sugar problems, he can't eat it. Did you fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot? Yes. Why? Because other people in his household can go ahead and eat it. Halacha Yud Tet. Hasholech of shachut lechavero miklal hamanot. Halacha Yud Tet. Hasholech of shachut lechavero michlal hamanot. If a person sent a slaughtered chicken to his friend, as is Mishloach Manot, Halacha Yud Tet. Hasholech of shachut lechavero michlal hamanot. Halacha Yud Tet. Hasholech of shachut lechavero michlal hamanot. If a person sent a slaughtered chicken to his friend, included as one of the portions from the Mishloach Manot, and afterwards it was found that it was treifa, there was a blemish in the animal, you need to go back and you need to send another portion instead of that chicken that was slaughtered and found to be not kosher. And only then is he going to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. So comes Hakam and he says, if a person went ahead and he sent a slaughtered animal, like a chicken, to his friend as one of the portions of the food, as is Mishloach Manot, and later it was found to be that it was treif, meaning that there was a blemish, there was a hole in the lungs or something like that, we're going to tell you that you don't fulfill your mitzvah of Mishloach Manot until you go ahead and you replace it with another portion of food. Then we're going to tell you, once you did that, you have fulfilled your obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Halacha Chaf. Hasholech Manot l're'ehu bi'ulam shem. If a person sent his Mishloach Manot to his friend anonymously, without saying who he is, she'ena mikabel yudei mi shalach alav hamanot. The recipient does not know who sent him these portions of food. Lo yatsa yedei chovad Mishloach Manot. You do not fulfill your obligation with the sending of the portions. V'lachen, and therefore, yachzor v'yishlach manot letzed yedei chovad. There you have to go back and you have to send the Mishloach Manot again to fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. So comes Hakam Avad and he says, if you send Mishloach Manot anonymously, you do not fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. You need to go back and you need to resend it. And this time when you're doing it, make sure the person knows who you are. If a person is sending his Mishloach Manot to his friend who is a Sephardi, basar kasher, if you're sending him kosher meat, ve'eno glat chalak, but it's not smooth, kedat Marana Beit Yosef, like the pin of Marana Beit Yosef, lo yatsa yidei chovoto. You do not fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. So comes Rav Chaim Igal and he says, if you're sending a Sephardi person glad kosher meat and not Beit Yosef meat, you did not fulfill your obligation in the Mishloach Manot. You have to make sure you send to a Sephardi Beit Yosef meat. Halacha Chav Aleph. Hasholech Manot l're'ehu. One who's going to send his Mishloach Manot to his friend. V'yatza yedei chovoto, and he fulfilled his obligation. V'rotzeh l'shloch l're'ehu achar mipirot shvi'it, and now he wants to send to his other friend from the produce of the 7th year. Rasha, you are allowed to do so. Ubelvad, and provided sheyudiya lo shehem mipirot shvi'it, you have to inform him that they're from produce of the 7th year. Continues the Rav Chaim Igal and he says, Umi sheshalchu lo manot, if somebody was sent the portions of food, and now he wants to go back and he wants to send from the 7th year produce to the sender, if you already fulfilled this obligation, the Mishloach Manot to somebody else, you are permitted to go back and to send from the 7th year produce to the sender. Because all you're doing right now is as if you're doing kindness with your friend. So therefore, Rabotai, when are you allowed to go ahead and send the 7th year produce? That's as long as you went ahead and you fulfilled your obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, like the halacha requires you to do so. Halacha Chavbet. Hasholech Manot lechaveiro. If one send his Mishloach Manot to his friend, if let's say before they got to the recipient, somebody stole them, or it got lost, you need to send a different Mishloach Manot in their place. If you send Mishloach Manot to your friend and they never received them, you did not do the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. You got to go back and you got to resend them and make sure they receive them. Halacha Chav Gimel. Hasholech Manot l're'ehu. One who sends his Mishloach Manot to his friend, Shehu Evyon, and the friend is a poor person, Yotzei yedei chovat shtei hamitzvot. You are able to fulfill with this the obligation of 2 mitzvot. Mishloach Manot isha l're'ehu matanot le'evyonim. By sending your matanot, by sending your Mishloach Manot to your friend who's a poor person, you are able to go ahead and fulfill 2 mitzvot. One of Mishloach Manot and the other one of Matanot le'evyonim. However, he says, La'achar she'iten od matana le'evyon acher. As long as you're going to go and you're going to give another present to another poor person. Because remember, it's a Matanot le'evyonim. The presents which we'll see is really money, but another in the following class, it has to be given to 2 poor people. So by you giving 1 Mishloach Manot to your friend who's poor, by you doing that, you fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, and also the mitzvah of Matanot le'evyonim. When you're going to go ahead and you're going to give another present to another poor person, then you fulfilled your obligation for Mishloach Manot and Matanot le'evyonim. V'yesh machmarim bezeh, and there are those that are stringent in this, and they say she'en lasot ken, you should not do so. V'tov lachush l'dvrehem, and it's good to be concerned for their words. V'lachan, and therefore, yiten od shtei matanot le'evyonim acharim, and therefore you should go ahead and you should give more 2 presents to 2 other people, meaning to 2 other poor people. So comes Rav Chaim Igal and he says, even though with 1 Mishloach Manot, if you're giving to a poor person, you are able to do the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, and Matanot le'evyonim, as long as you give also another matana to another poor person. Nevertheless, there are stringent opinions and they say not to do so. So in order to go ahead and be safe from all sides, we're going to tell you, when you're giving Mishloach Manot to 1 poor person, you want to be able to go ahead and give to another 2 poor people Matanot le'evyonim. Halacha Chav Daled. Toshav ir parashat shikorim b'Megillah b'Yudalet. If you have a resident that lives in a city which is not walled, that they read the Megillah on the 14th of Adar, If this type of person, Shishalach Manot L'Re'ehu, he went ahead and he sent his Mishloach Manot to his friend, Asher B'Yerushalayim, that is in Yerushalayim, Shekurim HaMegillah B'Tedvav, that they read the Megillah on the 15th of Adar. Ukigon, and for example, he says, Hasholech Mishechonot Ramot Shekurim B'Yudalid. For example, he says, if you have the neighborhood of Ramot, that they read the Megillah on the 14th of Adar, and they're sending it L'Re'ehu to his friend, Asher B'Yerushalayim Shekurim B'Tedvav, that are in Yerushalayim, that they read the Megillah on the 15th of Adar, V'yodei she'mikabel ha'matanot yocholam b'tedvav, and he knows that the recipient, of the Mishloach Manot is going to eat them on the 15th of Adar, Yetza Yedei Chovato, he has fulfilled his obligation for Mishloach Manot. So comes Chacham Ovadia and he says like this: if a person lives in a city where they read on the 14th of Adar the Megillah, but he's sending his Mishloach Manot to a person that lives in an area where they're going to read on the 15th of Adar, if you know that the recipient is going to eat your Mishloach Manot on the 15th of Adar, even though Rabotai, you're sending it to him on the 14th, for you it's good, but for him it's still not good. Nevertheless, if he's going to eat it on the 15th, you have fulfilled your obligation of Mishloach Manot. Halacha Havchei. Now we're going to see just the opposite case, Rabotai. Toshav Yerushalayim, if you have a resident who lives in Yerushalayim, Sheshalach Manot B'Yom Yudalet L'Sh'ar Arei Ha'aretz Shukrim HaMegillah B'Yudalet. If you went ahead and he sent his Mishloach Manot on the 14th of Adar to other cities of the land where they read the Megillah on the 14th of Adar, Yatza Yedei Chovato, he fulfills his obligation. So if you have a person that lives in a city where they read the Megillah on the 15th of Adar, and he sent his Mishloach Manot to a city where they read the Megillah on the 14th of Adar, he fulfills obligation. Aval, however, Im Shalach Manot Lahem B'Yom Tetvav. What happens if he sent the Mishloach Manot to the people that read the Megillah on the 14th of Adar? Lo Yatza, he does not fulfill his obligation. She'etzlam Eno Yom Simchat Purim, because by them it's no longer a day of rejoicing in Purim. Avar Yomo Batla Simchato, because once the day has passed, the simcha, the joy, is nullified. Okay, Rabotai, now we're going to go over a full review in Sif Aleph in regards to what exactly you must send. 2 manot, again, manot literally means portions. 2 manot of 2 kinds of food, or 2 cooked items, or 2 meat portions. Main mitzvah is 2 manot to 1 person. The whole reason of Mishloach Manot is the peace and the friendship that's going to build between one Jew and his fellow man. Seif Bet. In regards to must it be ready to eat or can it be raw? Many hold the food should be fit for consumption, usable for the Seudah, not necessarily cooked, but something that counts as food. Therefore, raw meat, fish, that is normal food, is generally acceptable, but a live animal not slaughtered is not a ready food portion. Seif Gimel, in regards to non-food gifts, do not count. Clothing, sheets, money, cigarettes, tobacco, Torah Chidushim, Sefarim, they do not count as the mitzvah for Mishloach Manot. Halacha, Mishloach Manot must be food or drink, not objects or cash. Seif Dalet, in regards to can drinks be a mana? Meat plus wine works, even 2 drinks can work, best to send 2 foods. Halacha, a drink can count as 1 mana, so food plus drink can fulfill the 2 manot requirement. Seif Hey, in regards to 2 different types, you need 2 different minim. Splitting 1 foot into 2 bowls doesn't help. Different cuts or limbs can count as different. Therefore, the halakha is going to tell us requirement is 2 manot, typically understood as 2 distinct items, 2 different foods or drinks, not the same thing divided. Seif Vav. Combo foods. In regards to combo foods, we started speaking about fish with egg or stuffed items, etc. Fish plus egg may be considered 1. Stuffed pastry may be 1. So therefore we're going to tell you add another item. And then we explained also if you place bread plus an important dish, it counts as 2 manot. Seif Zain. In regards to how respectable it should be respectable according to the giver. Send something respectable, ideally also according to the recipient. Ideally enough for a seuda amount. Seif Chet. In regards to sending them both together, preferably. Better to send them both at once, and some say you need separate utensils. Seif Tet. In regards to more is praiseworthy but not required. We started speaking about that once you fulfilled your obligation for Mishloach Manot, when it comes to other people, it's going to be praiseworthy to send more to other people. One who sends more is praiseworthy. Once you fulfill properly with one person, details for extras are only hidur. It's only beautifying the mitzvah of the mitzvah for Mishloach Manot. Seif Yud. It is proper not to begin the Purim meal until a person has first fulfilled the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, sending food gifts to a friend. However, it is permitted to taste a small amount of food before doing the mitzvot, and there's no problem with that. And then we did also see in the halacha, in regards to matanot le'evinim, before you sit down to have the su'udat Purim, you want to make sure you do the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot and matanot le'evinim. The custom today the common custom is to send minei mitika, sweets, for Mishloach Manot, such as candies, chocolates, cakes, pastries. Seif Yud Aleph. A person fulfills the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot even when sending to certain relatives or teachers. Therefore, sending to his rabbi, you are going to be allowed to do so because the verse says, Ish l're'ehu, a person to his fellow. A rabbi is included in this category. There is also an additional mitzvah of kavod Torah, honoring Torah scholars. A rabbi sending to his student also will be able to fulfill his obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. A son sending to his father, a father sending to his son. All of these count for the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Seif Yud Bet. In regards to a group combining to send to a Rav, a community gathering money to send one Mishloach Manot to the Rav, participants fulfill their obligation in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, even if each gave less than 2 manot worth. Seif Yud Gimel. In regards to daytime only, not at night. Mitzvah is the day, not at night. Seif Yud Daled. In regards to women and older children, where we're going to see that they are obligated, and also avoiding cross-gender sending. Women are chayav, women are obligated in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Married women, they're not fully exempt with their husband. So therefore we're going to tell you that women must send to women, men must send to men. Boys 13 plus, girls 12 plus are also obligated in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Younger kids should be trained even if they are minors. Seif Tet Vav. In regards to even a poor person must do it, and swapping meals. And ani, which means a poor person, is chayav in the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. If he only has those foods, what should he do in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot? He swaps with another poor person. But Rabotai, if he's going to do it on condition to return, that doesn't work. So therefore the halakha is going to tell us, even an ani is obligated in Mishloach Manot. Seif Tet Zain. In regards to you can deliver yourself, shalik is not required. You can't bring it yourself. Sending via a katan or a non-Jew still works, even though no former shalichut. But sending to a minor recipient does not work. Must send to a gadol. Even if you sent via a minor messenger, verify it arrived. However, with an adult, we presume the shalich delivered. Seif Yud Zain. Sending to an important person doesn't exempt the recipient. The chashuv recipient, meaning the important person who is the recipient, does not fulfill by receiving. because it's only honor, benefit, and not eating, like we explained, by the chashuv person, by the important person receiving the Mishloach Manot, and that's giving benefit to the sender. It does not mean that he did the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, because you have to also have the mitzvah of eating it. There's no eating involved, because it's the sender that's only sending it to the recipient. See, if Yud Chet, if the recipient refuses, you must send to someone else. If he refuses, send it to another person. If you send sweets to a diabetic, you still fulfilled because it's fit for his household. See, if Yud Tet, in regards to if one portion was treif, we spoke about replace it. If the slaughtered chicken was found treif, replace it with another kosher portion. Se'iv Chaf, anonymous sending doesn't work. Sending not glat meat to a Sephardi also doesn't work. So then we're going to tell you, if a person went ahead and he delivered the Mishloach Manot anonymous, he is not Yotzeh. If you send kosher not glat to a Sephardi, also you're not Yotzeh, you got to resend it again with a Beit Yosef type of meat. Se'iv Chav Aleph, Shvi'it produce can be used with notice. So then we're going to tell you, you may send Shvi'it foods if you inform. Returning Shvi'it to sender after you're already fulfilled elsewhere is allowed as kindness. Se'iv Chav Bet, if the package, the Mishloach Manot, was stolen or lost, we're going to see you have to resend it. If stolen or lost, send again. Halacha, if it never reached the recipient, you didn't fulfill sending to a person, meaning you didn't fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, you gotta resend it again. Se'iv Chav Gimel, in regards to sending to a poor person can overlap with Matanot Evinim, meaning with the extra gift. Sending to a poor person can count for both, but better to avoid. At minimum, give another matana to another poor person. Se'iv Chav Daled and Se'iv Chav Hey. Sending between a 14th city and Jerusalem, meaning a 15th city. If a 14th city person sends to Jerusalem and knows it will be eaten on the 15th, he can still fulfill his obligation of Mishloach Manot. A Jerusalem person sending on the 14th to 14 cities fulfills obligation of Mishloach Manot. However, sending to them on the 15th does not,